Greetings, YouTubers. This is Justin with DustOffTheBible.com. This is the first entry in what is going to be called Archaeology Meets the Bible. Now, we've already posted on these a couple different articles, and you can read those if you click the links below, either at the bottom of the video or in the comments. Our first video is going to be about the Kassite Period, which is roughly 1600 BCE to 1100 BCE. I want to talk briefly just about two pieces of data that I think you may find interesting. Our first piece of data comes from a collection of clay tablets called the Amarna letters. Now, these are letters that are correspondences between the Pharaoh and also some of the kings who were over in the land of Canaan. Now, the interesting thing is that these come from about the same time that Joshua and the Israelites would have been in the land of Canaan trying to conquer and enter, like we know the Exodus story to be. Two specific letters that I'd like to take a look at are Amarna letters 287 and letter 290. I think the text of these will be quite telling. The first one is from a king, or a mayor as he calls himself in Jerusalem, named Abdi-Havi, the mayor of Jerusalem, to the king of Pharaoh. They are now attempting to take Jerusalem. Pharaoh has placed his name in Jerusalem forever. He cannot abandon the land of Jerusalem, Gezer, Ashkelon, or Lachish. They have given oil, food, and supplies to the Hebrews, or to the Habiru. Really depends on how you want to pronounce it. Now, the Habiru, many have speculated, were actually the Hebrews. We're going to talk a little bit more of that in just a minute. I want to briefly cover letter 290. There's a snippet in the Amarna letter 290 that says, also from Abdi-Hava, mayor of Jerusalem, to King Pharaoh. A town near Jerusalem has deserted. Without archers, all the king's lands will be lost to the Habiru. Now, depending on who you ask, the Habiru is a reference to the Hebrews. Now, some may argue this: why are they the Hebrews and not the Israelites? This is a very valid question. I would point out, though, that the Hebrews, of course, are a distinct nationality apart from the Israelites. So, of course, we know that Abraham was a Hebrew. His descendants eventually become what we know as the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob. So to say that there were Hebrews in the land would not have been a contradictory statement of any nature. Of course, there are many Hebrews even beside the Israelites. Now, what is interesting is that we do have Egyptian inscriptions talking about Israel. Now, the reason why this is important is because I think two things are true. One, the Canaanites probably would have known these people to be Hebrews. And the reason is the Hebrews have already been connected to the land of Canaan even before they went into Egypt. Remember that Abraham came from basically east, from the Assyria and Babylon region, and then he migrated through Canaan, and then eventually some of his offspring ended up over in Egypt. So it's not a far stretch to think that any of the Hebrews, either related to Abraham or not, could have eventually been in the land of Canaan at this time and been a well-known people source. Of course, the Egyptians really wouldn't have known them as Hebrews since they didn't make it to the land of Egypt. However, the Israelites did make it to the land of Egypt. And there is a very interesting inscription talking about Israel. Now, there's a lot of inscriptions talking about Israel, but this one's important because it's from the same time period that Israel would have been entering into the Promised Land. Now, this is an inscription that is on basically the base of a statue over in Egypt. And here's the snippet that we're interested in. It says, Canaan has been plundered into every sort of woe. Now, this is a military exploit, basically an annal of King Pharaoh. And it says, Ashkelon has been overcome, Gezer has been captured, and Yenoam has made to be non-existent. Israel is laid to waste, and his seed is not. Now, this tells me a few things. Obviously, they knew Israel as a people group. They weren't just a loose-knit group of people. So the Egyptians were familiar at this point with who the Israelites actually were, naturally, because they were enslaved there for 400 years. Now, what is also striking about this inscription, which comes sometime slightly after the Amarna letters are written to the kings over in Jerusalem and back and forth to the Pharaoh, The towns mentioned in the Amarna letters specifically about the Hebrews are Gezer, Ashkelon, and in this particular instance on letter 287, Lachish. And Lachish is a battlefront that we'll see later in some of the archaeology. And then these are the same exact towns later that the Egyptian kings, the Egyptian pharaoh, of course, is mentioning that he had captured: Gezer, Ashkelon, and then another one listed as Yanoam. And there's a lot of speculation as to which town that is. And then it says Israel is laid to waste. And this seems to line up perfectly with what we know to be history at this time. Egypt would have known them as the Israelites. The Canaanites would have known them as the Hebrews. The battles seem to match up in history. And so there's not much more that can be said about that. It's hard to determine exactly that these are talking about the Hebrews. Right now, the best we can do is speculate. We're a couple thousand years away from the actual events. And of course, we're going off of, a language that hasn't been spoken for a very long time. So I don't want you to believe that these are 100% set in stone facts. What I can tell you, though, is that it does appear to be very strong evidence that the Hebrews, or the Israelites, came into the land of Canaan, as the Bible says, and waged war against the Canaanites. And that should be all for this first episode. Our next episode, we're going to look more specifically at the time of the Judges and moving slightly on into the Babylonian period. Thank you for listening. And once again, please visit our site at the link below, dustoffthebible.com.